So what I'm going to do is spend a very little bit of time just sort of chatting about where this has come from, and then I'm going to spend the remainder of the time putting up 8 suggestions on some ideas that you can basically try as soon as school starts. So that's kind of where we're headed. So I'm Jenn Norris. I'm a speech-language pathologist, as Chris has said. I guess it's really hard to ask this question, but I guess you can put in the chat box. Who are you? Are you a primary school, elementary, middle school, high school, or other? So why is a speech-language pathologist talking about behavior changes in organization? When I first started this job, I went to a presentation by Sarah Ward. She is a speech-language pathologist who works in an emergency department and basically helps assess emergency patients who potentially could have a head injury or something. And she ended up seeing her husband who got hit by a bus, and her whole life changed. And because of the damage he had to his brain, she had to basically help him relearn all of his executive functioning skills. And she really presented well, and it just so affected me. And everything she was saying was basically talking about my 2 children. It was such a, I don't know, it was very passionate, and I got right into executive functioning after seeing her. And what I was noticing, I also did some autism work, is that I'd be called into a classroom and the student with autism would be the one I'm referred for, but when I was looking at the classroom dynamics, he was reacting to behaviors that were going on within the classroom. So I was just like, oh my gosh, we got to start working on helping these other kids work on their behavior and help the teacher get strategies to help with these behaviors so we can help this one child with autism because they're reacting to it. So that's kind of where I started with all of this. And that's why a speech-language pathologist is talking about behavior. So why is this an issue? That's what we're going to talk about today, and then setting up some good habits for kids and some ideas and options. So why are kids disorganized? And I'm not talking about all kids, but when you teach in a class for a number of years, you know pretty quick who shows up with all of their stuff, and within a week you know whose desks are totally stuffed with stuff and their shoes are everywhere, and you know who you're going to be needing to be speaking to and helping. And there are a variety of reasons why it appears to be getting worse. One of them is technology. Kids aren't moving around. They're not being asked to organize because they're not really doing a whole lot anymore. They don't have to clean the rooms because they don't really play with anything anymore. And there's a whole other debate on that whole topic, so I'll just leave it at technology. Kids don't pretend play a lot anymore. They are on their technology. Without that pretend play, there's no role play. So you're the mom, I'm the dad. Let's do this. We're going to have this do this. And you start talking about all this, and all that self-talk really helps with your monitoring skills and helps with organizational skills. So that's a huge part. Again, that's a whole other chat for another day. And parents are enabling. Busy parents. Parents are working jobs. I'm working full-time, and this whole COVID thing has really proven that to me. I'm doing stuff for my kids because I don't have time to get stressed about making them come down and deal with it. So I'm often just doing it to solve the problem, and I'm enabling too. So how do we deal with that? And I guess I'm talking specifically about homework and getting stuff done. It's not just general disorganization, but a lot of this can be applied for that, or applied to that. So idea number 1, don't just write the homework down. So we're having kids using our agendas, and I guess what I'm thinking in my mind, all of us have a phone, or all of us have a paper calendar, and we need our kids to start doing that too. And we're going to start right from the get-go, and it has to be not only just a written down thing, but it has to be very purposeful. They have to be very active. They need to take responsibility for them right off the bat, and assume that parents are not checking. I checked probably about half the time as a parent with 2 kids because I'm trying to survive 2 children with ADHD myself, and you got to assume that they're not checking. So kids have to learn to be accountable very early for using an agenda. Positively reinforce their use. As soon as you see them starting to actively use that agenda, you're going to right off the bat, oh, I love how you're using that. You're going to remember that because you wrote it down. In your classroom time, you need to book the time for that agenda use. It has to be, and I know everybody's trying to fit stuff in, but this is a life skill. This is something that we use now, and it didn't seem to be as much of an issue as it is now, but kids are not, they're kind of flying through life, and they're not even recognizing what they're missing because they're not noticing that they're missing it. So that whole idea of they need to really, really be conscious and mindful and start writing stuff in their agenda. And it doesn't just have to be homework. It can be their favorite TV show. It can be they can have a purposeful discussion, and they're more likely to check it if there's something of their interest in there as well. My kids actually attended 1 year of Bridgeway, and they actually did a conscious check. They went in and they signed it to see that they had actually checked off that they had completed their homework, and if they did, their name went in for a prize at the end of the week. And of course, if they did it 5 days, there were five opportunities to win, and it was a huge deal to be picked for that, even in junior high. So what type of things can you put in an agenda? You can put in, like I say, favorite TV show. If they've got a favorite thing that they're doing, if they're meeting their friend online tonight, have them coordinate that in the classroom and write that down. If they're going out to supper, it can be anything you want it to be. And it doesn't, for the younger kids, it doesn't have to be like a full sentence. It can be a picture. It can be anything. It's something that they're going to go home and proudly show their parents. Look, we're doing this tonight. And then, of course, we talked about the phones versus paper. Younger kids have I find more and more are getting phones, but it doesn't matter which you're using. You're going to use what the kids are using. If they are showing it with paper, that's what you're going to use. If kids have phones, use it, because that's what they're using as well. And they're more motivated if they have a phone to actually use it and use it as an agenda. I find one of the biggest things is kids don't bring anything to class unless they're kind of reminded to do it. I'm just trying to think, when I was doing one of my autism observations in a high school, I watched a girl go back to her locker 3 times because she walked into class and she had nothing on her. And the teacher's kind of looking at her and she's like, do you have your homework? And sort of, she goes back out, comes back, and she's sitting down and we're about to write, and she puts her hand up, I don't have a pencil. Teacher made her go back out, quote, and get a lock. Like, she went to her locker 3 times for her textbook, her homework, and her pencil, and it was just like, oh my gosh. So we're going to try and help these guys remember to bring everything to class the first time. And a lot of kids just aren't mindful. They're just kind of going through their day, and they're just waiting for everyone else to tell them what to do next. They're thinking about, and it could be an attention and focus thing. It could be a variety of reasons, and we will talk about that a little bit later. But kids need to learn, no matter what the issue is, how to self-monitor and sort of picture in their head what's going to come next before it happens. And they also need feedback and support, especially when this is a new thing and it's difficult. A lot of these kids this is not an easy thing for them to do. A lot of kids do not have these skills in junior high and high school, especially if they do have a diagnosis, or they have no diagnosis, but they could have a diagnosis. So my next step is going to be the cue. You guys are going to be the cue. Oh my, there we go. Okay. Help students remember what they need for class. So at the beginning, or at the onset of the school year, you can have a big discussion. Okay, these are my expectations of what you are to bring to class every day. And I think everybody sort of has that, but I want you to be really mindful that you're going to follow up with it, and you're going to be the cue to help them remember before they even walk into the door. I find in elementary school, you can do a match the picture, and I'll show you what that looks like. You can have some fun with it. You can take a goofy picture of yourself, a favorite character, and what you're going to do is put all the items that they basically need for class. And you're going to stand beside the picture and give positive feedback to everybody as they're walking in. So you got your pencil. I see you've got everything today. You rock. You can do it however you're feeling comfortable. And if something is forgotten, you can give a big cue to those kids who have an attention and focus difficulty. You can just you have everything you need for my class. And what you're doing by asking that, you are making them think, do I have everything? What do I need? And as soon as they start engaging in that self-talk, that's the skill that we're going to have as a long-term skill. And some kids are just kind of, they kind of go through life. It's not an attention and focus thing. They're just kind of doing what they do. You can even look at them and kind of stand in front of them and go, And of course, they're going to have that same reaction. Oh, what did I do? What did I forget? And you can kind of stand in front of the door, and you're keeping it light. You're not telling them they did anything wrong. And eventually, they're going to see you. And as soon as they realize, I don't have my pencil, they're just going to turn around and go get it before they even go back in. And that way, there's no humiliation. There's no nailing these guys. We don't know what kind of night or day these guys had the day before. And this whole be the cue situation, that could be a presentation by itself. We did a whole day on helping with visualization and planning on another day. So this is an example of matching the picture. This is actually the picture I used for my own son way back when he was in grade 2, because my husband was the one dropping him off, and he consistently There was one day he forgot shoes, and he actually got to the school with just socks on, and he was ready to run across the snow in his socks. And my husband was like, no, 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 we're not having a picture. And after about the 12th time something was forgotten, he agreed to having the picture on the back of the door. So this picture was actually on this door. And what it was, he had his books, he had his backpack, and he had his coat. I've just added pencil and math book in there as well. But it can be whatever you need your students to have every single day. And if I was really smart, at the very bottom, you can see an apple and an orange. That's part of his lunch. We were just, I wanted him to pose for the picture. But you can sort of see what you're doing is you're helping the students visualize and picture themselves and match that picture. You're not giving them a list. You're not giving them a visual. This is kind of a visual schedule, but it's more holistic than that. They're picturing the whole picture. Do I have everything with me? And if there's something special they need, if they have a special project, this picture should be laminated, and you can have a dry erase marker, and you could draw a great big square saying special project due tomorrow, bring with you. And you could put it right on there and make it very mindful again. I've seen teachers use like their favorite hockey player, Simpsons character, whatever you think is going to get the kids goats. And if you really want to get them, change it up for every couple of months and see if they'll notice. Because if they're noticing, that means they're paying attention. All right. Next option, make school a positive experience for students that are already struggling. So we had a lot of this even in my house because it is very stressful in my house. My husband and I both work full time, and our kids don't necessarily do things without being given lots of cues and help. So yelling and saying, do your homework, get to class, get to work. Is that effective? What you're doing is you're forming an emotional memory. And in terms of that, if anybody in here has a memory of being repeatedly reprimanded for not doing something that's really hard for you, that actually freezes your learning, and you actually have a brain change when you are being told over and over again that you were doing something wrong. So in grade 6, I was struggling with math, and I had a very sarcastic math teacher, and he used to yell at all of us because we weren't doing it fast enough. And he actually used the STUPID word, but that was back in the 70s, on a number of the kids in the class. I hate math to this day. As soon as I start seeing math work, I can feel my body going, oh. And my son had a similar experience. In grade 8, his teacher was very sarcastic with him, and he actually stopped talking altogether and was terrified to go into his class because he was afraid if he said anything, he was going to get a sarcastic response. And that's significant. You don't need that. So we're going to try and create some positive emotional memories with what's going on. So lots and lots of positive type words and positive type experiences to help these guys get through. Helping students develop their nonverbal memories. And again, this is a whole other presentation again that could happen. Students need to learn how to plan their next move. So we can talk them through the steps when we're trying to get, so if you're going to have a project due, or if there's something that they're working on, you're going to ask them to picture what they're thinking about. Where are they going to do their homework? What kind of materials are they going to need? Do they need an internet connection? Do they have an internet connection? You're going to talk about all the needs that they have and have them picture it in their mind, and have them picture, how much time do you think you're going to need to do this project? Do you need 1 day? Are you going to need more than 1 day? Okay, that's the case. It's due on this date. You can have the calendar written right out, and you can talk about how many days in advance they need to start. And I say all of this, but kids in elementary school can only remember about 24 hours in terms of planning. So we're working on developing that skill. Children in junior high are closer to 3 days, and it's amazing because we all give assignments and things like that. In my speech, I do once a week. So I'm giving kids primary stuff, and I'm assuming that parents are going to take it out of there and hopefully work on it and have something back by the following week. Kids aren't going to remember that because they generally in primary and grade 1 are only going to remember about 8 to 12 to 24 hours, depending on where their development is. So something to consider. So when you can visualize that planning on a piece of paper or on the board, that is going to help them develop that skill. Ask them how they're going to plan to do it and see what they say. It's like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to work on this. How are you going to do it? Do they have all the steps, or are they missing something crucial? You can demonstrate this in class. I think a lot of people are doing work in class anyway because homework is kind of hard for a lot of students. Were the students accurate in their predictions? And it's lots and lots of practice, because that is kind of what you're working for in real life, is helping them Have a goal and work towards it. That's really what we're teaching. All right, number 5, give students what they can do first to build their confidence. And again, if we were here in person, maybe I should go back to my presentation so I can see what everybody's thinking. Difficulty versus motivation. What does motivation look like? We can sort of see some kids. What does motivation look like to people when you, or lack of motivation, when you see it visually? Does anybody want to write something out there? So weird. No, it's not in person. I apologize. So it is very hard to describe motivation, because motivation is not necessarily, what you're seeing is not necessarily what it is. And one of the things we talk about a lot in our behavior classes is that you're trying to describe something operationally. It can only be something you can see. So if we're seeing a kid who's laying on their desk, who's got some responses, oh, I saw. Yeah, think, why am I doing this? They don't look interested. Absolutely. They might have their head on their desk. They might have a really laid back, slack down kind of look in. They're not giving you eye contact. They might walk out of the room. And the question is it really lack of motivation? It could be a whole variety of different things. I'll keep doing that. How about trauma? They had a really rough night the night before. How about kids who didn't get a breakfast or didn't get much of a supper last night, so they're hungry and fatigued for having not enough calories. A lot of kids are coming from a pretty rough place. So, and I'm thinking even from the ADHD, ASD side of things, kids with ASD often have anxieties, and they're worried about whatever thing that they're worried about in that moment. They're not paying attention to you because they're worried about something that's big going on in their minds. Kids with ADHD, they're hearing the pencil drop, they're having trouble staying in their seat, all of the things that could be going on. And all of those things could look like lack of motivation. So what I would suggest we try to do is give students what they can do first. We want to build their confidence, and it's all a part of building rapport. And that is, it is a challenge, is figuring out what can they do. And the majority of kids out there, if they can do it, they're going to do it. If it's at all difficult, some kids are going to give up pretty early, and we can sort of figure out that sweet spot of how far to push things. But we don't know if they've come from a night of really bad situations, or if they're just kind of tired, or they could be bored or lack of not motivated. It's really hard to tell. But I guess that's what it is. I want to make sure that people are thinking about where your kids are coming from and building up that success to build their confidence first. So once they know that you're going to praise them for doing what they've tried to do, they're more likely to try again. And one thing, I actually got into an argument with my son's teacher in grade 8. I'm sure I'm an awful parent. My son has a severe writing difficulty. He is in the 2nd percentile, and he's in grade 12, and writing is really, really hard for him. And this teacher consistently said, no, he cannot type, he must write. And what he wrote was extremely unintelligible, and it's not for lack of trying, it's not for lack of therapy, all of these things. He just should not hold a pencil, he should type. And we got into some pretty significant arguments because my son is 95th percentile in terms of his thoughts and his receptive language and his expressive language. He's got fantastic verbal skills, but he can't write them down. So what is your goal with homework? Are you looking for writing skills, or are you looking for the student's ideas? And if you're looking for the student's ideas, you might want to consider some different options, because again, and I don't know the research on changes for kids and their ability to write, but that seems to be an increasing problem as well, where kids are not able to express themselves in writing well. So how can they express themselves? And it's looking at different options. And if you're looking for their ideas, consider other options, just because it is very frustrating as a parent when you're asked to write a 2-page something on a topic, and I know darn well I might get 2 sentences written down, and the teacher's not going to be able to read it if there's no spaces and the letters are so illegibly formed. So it just made it a really hard exercise for him. And it was very frustrating, and of course he hates writing. All right. Please give these students lots of praise when they are attempting to work. So if you've got a student who is trying to write something down, your positive words might be the only thing your student may hear today. I've just finished reading some articles that talk about praise from a teacher, especially in elementary school, has more effect than pretty much any other tangible reward or reinforcement that's available. Teacher attention is one of the biggest. And 4-to-1 is the biggest ratio. So if you can provide praise 4 times for every 1 correction that you provide to that child or within your classroom setting, you are much more likely to have kids responding all over the place. And it is hard to do 4-to-1, especially if you've got someone in your class who is really crying for that negative attention and it's trying to work on that. And it's something to consider when I talk about poverty and praise. Research shows that homes that are considered pretty hard financial situations, they're more likely to give 1 praise for every 2 criticisms. So that's a lot of negative in the house if there's a lot of stress in the house. And that's not even including houses with trauma and houses that just have other complications. This is just poverty. Versus 4-to-1, which they say is the most accurate, most effective way to get individuals to do what you want them to do. And they suggest giving specific feedback. Instead of saying just good job, it's like, I love the way you tried to expand that math problem. I love the way you wrote that sentence or a paragraph. And there are going to be days with some of these kids, you're going to be struggling. I love the way you're sitting for the 10 seconds that you're sitting. But they get so much negative feedback. They'd rather get the negative from you, and they're feeding off of that and being reinforced by that negative attention. So it's trying to switch it over to something positive and making your classroom more like, and I'll say Disneyland, but trying to make your classroom a safe and happy place to be as best as it can be. And this is back to my other discussion. So consider other options to a written assignment. There are a lot of students with writing difficulties now, and I would love to know why. I would love to have some research done on this. And it's just that whole idea of thoughts and knowledge versus writing skills. So be clear when you're assigning it, what are you looking for? We had a really cool teacher for my older son who absolutely loved this. He was given the option to do a podcast, a presentation, a home recording on his phone, or an oral explanation, or 1 math problem to be submitted, because of course math is hard to put on a computer, instead of like a page of math problems. Basically, he explained what he did to the teacher, and he wrote out 1 math problem, and the teacher actually created like almost like a graph system, so he could write out 1 square per number, and he did it, God love him. But 1 math problem was probably equivalent to what a typical kid would be able to do 15. It was brutal. It's very, very slow. But podcasts are a cool option, and there's a ton of free software, and I'll tell you, if I can figure it out, a lot of the younger kids can probably do a far better job with really cool effects and stuff. And they can do all these cool presentations through a podcast or a PowerPoint or some sort of a way to deal with that. The goal is, what are you trying to teach? It's the teaching students how to plan and complete a goal. That's really what we're showing kids, and teaching life skills, and that is one of them. All right, so this would be the time for questions and thoughts. And what I guess you can ask yourself, and a lot of people are doing this, what I want everybody to think about when they're doing this is being very mindful about how often am I encouraging this. Do a little check mark every time you notice that you're giving a student some praise. If you've got a child who's really struggling, find out how many times you praise that student in a day, and sort of give yourself a check mark and see if you're actually doing a 4-to-1 ratio, and see if there's a difference if you are. If you're standing at the front of the room, do you notice that kids are starting to remember their stuff, and how many of them have to go back? And if you need to, I write everything down. That's the story of my life. I put masking tape on my arm and I check it off. Encouraging students to match the picture, trying to make a more positive experience. And that could be even just by asking, how is everybody's day? How is everybody liking school? You could even ask, what would make life easier for you in school? And it's surprising for some of those later elementary, early junior high kids, what they'll come out and tell you. I wish I had a breakfast. I wish I had, and you learn a lot from the kids from just asking those questions. helping to develop students' nonverbal memories by talking them through an upcoming task. And what we're doing is sort of saying, okay, you are here now. You have homework here tonight. What does it look like? Where are you going to go study? What do you need where you are studying? Can you picture it in your head? Okay, walk yourself from the front door to the kitchen table where you do your work. Where's your pencil? Can you picture where it is? Oh, it's in a drawer. Okay, go get it. Bring it back to the table. And it sounds very hokey, and I'm doing all these gestures and talking with my hands, but what I'm doing is I'm actually doing it in my head, and what that's doing is forming a pathway. And these guys don't have a lot of that type of skill. So the more they can tell you about it, and they can reach over and pretend that they're grabbing their pencil, and you can see their eyes going in the air trying to picture where the object is or what they're trying to do, all of those nonverbal movements are telling you that the child is thinking about, this is where it is. They're visualizing it, and they're creating a new pathway or reinforcing the pathway that's developing. So that's a huge task. And if you're giving the students what they can successfully do, they're more likely to try it. And of course, that's given all the circumstances of what students might be experiencing at home. But if they can do it here in the classroom or do it in class, that is going to help a whole lot. Lots and lots of praise. And of course, considering alternatives to written assignments. So I guess in my mind, in the fall during COVID-19 and all the crazy, I could try. What is something that you would consider trying right away? Is there something that you think that, like I say, there's nothing here I don't think that is absolutely like, whoa, mind-blowingly new, but it's that mindfulness yourself of, I'm going to try this, I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to keep track of how often I'm doing it. So what's one thing that you could try? And again, thank you. Somebody's going to match the picture, which I think is great. Is there something there that you find that you wish you knew more about? Is there a question out there that you wish that I could talk more about? I've basically done, we were told to talk for like 40-ish minutes, and the rest of the time is supposed to be for questions. But is there something that you wish you knew more about? Is there something that you'd like to try? I should share, I believe, from what I understand from the provincial government, that every school board is going to have at least one board-certified behavior analyst soon. There's 7 of us going through the program right now, and some of them, I think it's 1 person per board to start, and I know that the person who is trying to do it is trying to get 2 per board. And I believe what we're supposed to do is we are supposed to be, I'm just going to hit this. I am presenting. Stop presenting. Okay, this way I can talk to everybody a little easier. If there are, if you have a really challenging classroom with a lot of complex dynamics, I believe what we are supposed to do is go in and sort of help with teaching some learning strategies to the teachers to teach the kids. That's kind of what I'm understanding, but I'm not quite sure on what exactly we're going to be doing. But we're going to be sort of not doing the top 1% like the behavior specialist. It's going to be more tier 1 consultation with teachers is what it sounds like. But anyway, so that's a piece of information that I'm hoping is going to come out soon. And if anybody wants to email me with some questions, I can't necessarily answer specifics, but I can lead people in the right direction. And my email was on that first slide. And if anybody wants a copy of the slides, you're welcome to email me, and you can send me your name and I'll send it to your GNESPES account.